This is a messed up series. Like, I am kind of shocked about Karsearin Adventures of a Red Dragon, because I covered this series about a few months back. I covered the first 10 to 13 chapters, and I basically said it was a really good dragon series. It was about, following a character that was a dragon that wanted to experience the world. It was a very traditional fantasy. It was not, let's say, a reincarnated series, wasn't a transported series. It was just straight up a fantasy story, a traditional fantasy story, and what can really be wrong with following a dragon. And so ever since then, obviously, we have about 30 or so chapters out, and I caught up, and I was absolutely blown away by the sheer focus on the mental aspect of our characters and the moral compass that our main male character Karsearin has. That is what is kind of blown me away, and what's even kind of egged me on to even make this video in the first place, because if anyone knows what I'm into, they know I love psychological. I absolutely love getting into the character's mind, learning about them, getting to know their psyche. It's one of the big reasons why I love Tokyo Ghoul. It's one of the big reasons why I love ReZero. I love getting to understand how characters tick as they go through certain issues or trauma, and they get to learn and experience things, and they learn about themselves and learn to change. That is exactly what Karsearin Adventures of a Red Dragon is trying to do with our main character, Karsearin. So let's talk about that. What is exactly happening? So as I said already, the series follows our main male character Karsearin, that is a dragon. And when the series opens up, he's very naive. He is someone that's just basically of a teenage boy, someone that hasn't really got to experience anything. He ran away from home because he wanted to experience the world for himself, and so that's what he did. He went off on his own, he figured out a spell to turn himself into a human, and he just went adventuring. And obviously, thanks to him being very naive, he learned very quickly that the world isn't sunshine and rainbows. The world has a lot of darkness, the world has a lot of sadness, and he learned that very, very quickly by being basically sold off, to also being, used as kind of like a scapegoat, and used as a way to be like a scapegoat and look like a princess, and then eventually be assassinated. It was straight up back-to-back awful things that happened to our main character over and over again. And I find the premise very fascinating, because when you think about traditional fantasy stories, okay? You have dragons within stories that are obviously these all-powerful beings, and taking them down is definitely, it takes a lot of effort. And you hear a lot about evil dragons, dragons that have no, morals or care for humanity whatsoever. And as the series opens up, you see, once again, our main character, he's naive. He hasn't really had any full interactions with humanity whatsoever. And so, when you see him constantly mistreated, you're like, wow, is this the origin story of a dragon that is going to become evil because of just how humanity keeps mistreating him over and over again? Now, you're probably wondering, okay, so he's being mistreated, why isn't he not doing anything about it? Well, early on, we come to find out, thanks to him, wanting to be a scapegoat, or he didn't want to be, he was forced into being a scapegoat for another princess. Basically, he had a spell casted on him where his voice was changed. And because of his voice being changed, it was kind of like a curse, and he wasn't able to transform back into a dragon and use his magic. So he was basically restricted as just a normal human at that point, and so he couldn't really do anything to fight back. Nothing that happened around him, he couldn't do anything. He was continuously at the whims of those around him, those that would be nothing to him in comparison if he actually had his dragon form, which led to a very fascinating circumstance. He learned very quickly that a lot of people that, put on these acts of kindness and smiles sometimes might be wanting something else, or leading you down a path and they're wanting to take something from you. And that is what Karsearin learns very, very quickly within the story. And it's a major betrayal around the, chapter 12, chapter 13 point of the story, and you get to see the ramifications of that as the story keeps progressing. But, to kind of nail into the fact of why this series is messed up, is because, obviously, from that alone, you're like, okay, so clearly a lot of bad things keep happening to our main character, and it makes sense that he might find some form of disdain towards humanity thanks to that. But things continue on, and we get to see more of his thought process, how he feels about humans, how he feels about life in general, and because he is technically a mythical entity, he is a dragon, he is not able to understand normal human compassion and morals. And I find this subject very fascinating. I always love this in fantasy stories, like when you have something like a fairy, or you have something like any form of mythological creature that is kind of a big focus of a story, when you kind of find out that their overall thought patterns and how they feel about certain living creatures or life and death is vastly different in comparison to what humanity feels. And that is kind of what we learn very quickly on when he starts to adventure with this mercenary that tries to help him out. And basically, this mercenary is someone that, is obviously not the best of guys, but he's trying his best to live a nice life. And he's obviously trying to get vengeance for his family basically dying to this rogue empire, which is kind of connected with Karserin's betrayal, versus Karsearin being betrayed and, used as a scapegoat as a princess, and everything kind of lines up. But basically, there is a moment that happens within the woods to where there's this woman running away from these beasts. And these beasts will only chase after someone that they focus on and think they're their prey or slash target. And obviously, because of that, they won't change targets. They won't go after Karsearin or the mercenary. They'll just continuously chasing the girl until she's obviously dead or the mythical beasts are dead. One or the other. And the point here is that Karserin's like, okay, let me throw her across the water. And, now they're separated, which means that, they're chasing after her, they can't get to her, they won't come after us, we're a-okay. And it's very obvious from that point forward that Karsearin just does not care about the life and death of others around him, because he doesn't understand what it really means to lose something, so to speak. He understands pain, he understands, how it feels to be upset maybe to a certain degree, but overall he doesn't actually understand the weight of loss, the weight of life and death itself, and how short human time span really is in comparison to someone like a dragon that's able to live for thousands of years, which that's another key point to talk about. Karsearin is 300 years old. That's what is basically stated right at the beginning. A 300-year-old dragon. But in dragon age, that's basically a hatchling. They're incredibly young, very naive, a child. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, wow. So just like, yeah, lifespans of dragons to, humans is just so different, in fact, that it's just like, yeah, he hasn't really got to experience the pain of loss and life and death and realize why humans, just like how it feels to have their life just cut so short so quickly when they're only around maybe for 20 or 30 years. So the point is that Karsearin Adventures of a Red Dragon has some very dark aspects to it that is following a main character that lacks a moral compass. And at this point in time, when me currently caught up, there is nobody within the story that is technically holding him in place and becoming really his moral compass yet, which is a scary thing, because you gotta imagine, a dragon from a very early age that learns about humanity, learns what humanity is, and learns to not, let's say, completely look down on humanity and understand how strong they are, but learns also how to fight them, would be a very scary thing. And so this story, honestly, like I said, it could take a very dark and messed up turn. It could probably eventually turn into a villain story, like we're following like a villainous dragon as the story goes on. That is the way the story kind of sets up. It's what it's easily setting up with these chapters, and I'm going to be honest with you, I read ahead, and the chapters later on, oh boy, honestly, it's good. So, all I'm saying is that Karsearin is a series I've been enjoying quite a bit. I have been enjoying it since I first started reading it months ago, but thanks to the latest stuff that's been happening within the, the series, and how, like, Karsearin is now able to turn back into a dragon and fight again, and, is willing to just wipe out humans left and right with no care or disregard for them, it just shows once again, he lacks that moral compass, and that is frightening. So if you are interested in reading Karsearin Adventures of a Red Dragon, link is in the description. I highly recommend it. I'm always a big fan of traditional fantasy stories, and especially stories with dragons adventuring, and if I have a character, the main character, that is a dragon, that automatically is a win in my book. And so because of that, if you are interested in maybe following a character that might wind up being kind of like a villain, do sit down and give this a read. You can easily catch up within a day. It's not that hard. And I'll say, as the content I've read up ahead, past the stuff that you can read for free, very good. Legitimately good. I am super, super stoked to see where the story goes after. But, anyways, be safe, stay healthy. Once again, click on the link if you want to read it for yourself. Be safe, and Chibi out.